Every city that's ever hosted a World Cup looks more or less the same. Flat land, a big river, and plenty of room to sprawl. Rome grew up on the Tiber, Paris on the Seine, Rio and Buenos Aires on wide, forgiving coastal plains. Football needs that kind of ground, dense street grids, easy access, and space for a stadium that holds 80,000 people. But one of the 2026 host cities breaks every single rule on that list. San Francisco is 7 miles square, stacked with more than 50 hills, boxed in by water on 3 sides, and built largely on sand. In almost every way you can measure, it is the anti-football city. So how did a place this hostile to the game end up hosting the biggest football tournament on Earth? The answer is stranger than it sounds, because to play the matches at all, the World Cup had to leave town. Most cities have to fight for years just to win a World Cup. San Francisco is the only host whose own geography fought the tournament off and won. Think about why every other host looks so similar. A flat plain beside a navigable river is the perfect place to build a big city. The land is easy to grade, easy to pave, and easy to fill with the dense grid of streets that funnels tens of thousands of fans toward one giant stadium. That same formula has repeated itself across more than a century of World Cups, from Europe to South America to the Middle East. San Francisco is the exact inverse of that formula. It sits on the tip of a narrow peninsula, hemmed in by the Pacific Ocean on one side, the bay on another, and the Golden Gate Strait at its throat. There is almost nowhere to expand. And what little land exists is anything but flat. The city is famous for its hills, but the sheer number still catches people off guard. More than 50 named hills crowd into those 7 square miles, with Mount Davidson rising to roughly 938 feet near the geographic center. When American surveyors arrived in the 1850s, they did something almost absurd. They drew a standard rectangular street grid on paper and stamped it straight down over the terrain, ignoring the slopes entirely. Streets that look perfectly tidy on a map run right up near vertical hillsides in real life, some of them so steep that cars park at angles that look almost cartoonish. The cable car wasn't invented as charming decoration, it existed because the grid was an act of denial, and somebody still had to find a way to actually haul people up those impossible streets. Then there's the ground itself. The western half of the city was once an enormous field of shifting sand dunes, by some accounts in San Francisco's own planning and historical geography records, one of the largest dune ecosystems in the Western Hemisphere. People eventually paved over it, but sand makes a terrible foundation for the kind of massive, heavy structure a World Cup stadium demands. Hills, water, and sand all push toward the same conclusion. If the land can't comfortably hold a football city, then the obvious question becomes this: where on earth did they actually put the football? Here's the part that should be impossible for a World Cup host. San Francisco isn't hosting a single match inside its own city limits, not one of them. The games the world will watch under the San Francisco banner are played about 40 miles south in a city called Santa Clara, deep in the flat sprawl of Silicon Valley. 40 miles in a region this congested can mean a 90-minute drive in traffic, the kind of gap that would be unthinkable for almost any other host on the planet. The venue is Levi's Stadium, home of the NFL's 49ers, sitting right next to San Jose on exactly the kind of wide, level ground San Francisco never had. And for the 2026 tournament, FIFA stripped the corporate name off the building and officially rebranded it for the length of the event. Its tournament name is San Francisco Bay Area Stadium, a building the actual city of San Francisco has nothing to do with, in a town many fans abroad have never even heard of. This isn't a quirk of one tournament. San Francisco proper has never hosted a World Cup match in the entire history of the competition. Not in 2026, and as you're about to see, not in 1994 either. The city's reputation does all the marketing. A valley 40 miles away does all the work. The split almost closed once. Back in 2006, the 49ers floated a plan to build a brand new stadium inside San Francisco itself, at Candlestick Point on the city's southeastern edge. It would have finally put a major venue on actual city ground, and then the whole deal collapsed. Negotiations with the city fell apart, the team turned south instead, and they built beside their own offices and training facility in Santa Clara. So the terrain didn't just shape the city, it expelled the main event. The most famous fact about San Francisco's World Cup is that it isn't in San Francisco, and given the land, it never really could be. If you find the way geography quietly runs an entire story as fascinating as I do, subscribe. That's the whole channel. Because the displacement doesn't stop at the stadium, the city's single most famous feature gets left behind on match day too. And it isn't just the stadium that had to leave the city. So did the one thing San Francisco is most famous for in the first place. Picture San Francisco and you probably picture fog. Thick gray banks of it pouring through the Golden Gate on a summer afternoon, swallowing the bridge towers whole and dropping the temperature 10 degrees in a single hour. Tourists step off the plane in shorts and tank tops, expecting California sunshine, and end up shivering on a street corner buying an emergency hoodie. The city's summer chill is so notorious that locals eventually gave the fog its own name. They call it Carl, and July, in the very heart of tourist season, is often its grayest, foggiest, most stubborn month of all. There's a famous line people love to quote about it. The coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco, and it almost always gets pinned on Mark Twain. Here's the problem, Twain never actually wrote that line. The closest thing in his letters quotes an 18th century English actor named James Quinn, and both men were talking about Paris, not San Francisco. Twain himself described the city's real climate as mild and remarkably even. But the real twist is what the fog does to this story. That cool, gray, signature San Francisco weather doesn't travel 40 miles inland. Santa Clara sits in a warm, sunny valley that can run roughly a dozen degrees hotter than the foggy city on the very same afternoon. So when the world tunes in to watch San Francisco host its matches in June and July, it won't see the fog at all. It'll see bright sun, dry heat, and players taking mandatory cooling breaks. Even the weather that defines the city's whole identity gets left behind at the county line. The displacement isn't only physical anymore. It's the city's entire personality, performed 40 miles away under a completely different sky. The land made San Francisco the opposite of a football city. Its history then made it the opposite of a host. Look at who usually hosts these tournaments. Capitals, financial centers, establishment cities, the places that represent the official face of a country. San Francisco has spent its entire modern life being the opposite of that. It started as a gold rush boomtown, a place thrown up almost overnight by people chasing something the rest of the country dismissed as a fantasy. From that very first chapter, the city ran on outsiders, dreamers, and people who didn't fit in anywhere else. A century later, it became the headquarters of American counterculture. The beat writers made it their home in the 1950s, reading poetry in basement cafes while the rest of the nation chased white picket fences. In 1967, something like 100,000 young people poured into the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood for the Summer of Love, turning a few square blocks into the symbolic capital of a generation. In 1977, the city elected Harvey Milk, one of the first openly gay officials in the entire country, and before long the phrase San Francisco Democrat had hardened into a national political insult, shorthand for everything that lived outside the mainstream. That is not the resume of a typical World Cup host. It's the resume of a place that has always defined itself against whatever the establishment happened to be doing. And that matters because it means San Francisco isn't the opposite of a normal host on just one axis. It's the opposite on three of them at once: the terrain, the climate, and the temperament all pulling in the same strange direction. So when the most mainstream, establishment-friendly sporting event on the planet finally rolls into town, the friction isn't some accident of timing. It's baked into what the city has always been. That old friction has taken on a brand new shape in 2026, and it's landing at the worst possible moment. San Francisco is a sanctuary city, one of 7 sanctuary jurisdictions among the 11 United States host cities. And it's hosting a global event under a federal administration that has spent the year clashing with exactly those kinds of places. As of mid-2026, the tension is concrete and very public. According to reporting from outlets including NBC News, federal immigration agents could be present around World Cup venues with no internal guidance barring arrests at stadiums. Former FIFA president Sepp Blatter publicly backed a fan-led boycott, quoting a Swiss anti-corruption expert who told supporters to simply stay away from the United States. Vice presidents of major European football federations floated boycotts of their own. Even ticket prices and travel costs turned political, with host city mayors and state attorneys general pushing back hard. It's worth flagging that this is the fastest moving part of the entire story, and the specific details may well shift by the time you watch this. The headlines change week to week, and what's true at kickoff may read very differently by the knockout rounds. But strip away the noise of the moment, and the pattern underneath is old and deeply familiar. This is a city that built its identity on welcoming the people the rest of the country turned away, now hosting a tournament whose visitors are being scrutinized at the border like never before. A city that has spent decades positioning itself against the national mainstream is now being asked to host the mainstream's single biggest party. This collision isn't fresh friction at all. It's the modern echo of a city that never quite fit the country it's now welcoming. Which raises one obvious question. Has the Bay Area run through this exact dance before? It absolutely has, 30 years ago, almost to the letter. This is not the first time the Bay Area hosted a World Cup by quietly sending it somewhere else. Rewind to 1994, the very first time the United States ever hosted the tournament. The Bay Area was a marquee region, handed 6 full matches, including a 4th of July showdown between the United States and the eventual champions Brazil. But not one of those 6 games was played in San Francisco. They all went to Stanford Stadium on the university campus in Palo Alto, roughly 35 miles south of the city. Candlestick Park, sitting right inside San Francisco, was passed over and ruled out, largely because of scheduling conflicts with Major League Baseball. And the matches were enormous. Nearly 500,000 fans packed into those 6 games at Stanford, with the July 4th clash against Brazil alone drawing more than 84,000 people. Picture that scene for a moment, an Independence Day crowd waving American flags inside a college football bowl in the heart of Silicon Valley, watching the host nation get knocked out by the eventual world champions. The tournament as a whole set an attendance record that still stands today, more than 30 years later. And its roaring success in places like Palo Alto helped convince American organizers to launch Major League Soccer just 2 years afterward, planting the professional game in a country that had nearly given up on it. So the precedent was locked in 3 decades ago. When the World Cup first came to the Bay Area, San Francisco hosted it the same way it's hosting now, by lending its name to a stadium somewhere else and watching the actual football unfold down the peninsula. Twice in 30 years, the city has thrown a party it physically could not hold at home. And even the borrowed ground that stadium sits on is living on borrowed time. The whole reason San Francisco looks the way it does, the crowded hills, the narrow peninsula, the restless coastline, is that this is some of the most geologically active land in the entire country. Major fault systems run directly beneath the region, grinding past each other and storing up pressure year after year. In 1906, a massive earthquake and the fires that followed leveled much of the city, in a disaster still ranked among the worst in American history. Then in 1989, the Loma Prieta quake struck during the World Series at Candlestick Park, shaking the packed stadium live on national television moments before a baseball game was set to begin. 60,000 fans sat in the stands as the upper deck swayed, and for a few seconds the whole country watched the ground itself interrupt a sporting event. The same forces that decided where the city could exist in the first place never actually switched off. They are still moving, slowly and quietly, underneath everything built on top of them, including that flat valley 40 miles south where the World Cup now lives. So go back to that glowing sign on the stadium in Santa Clara one more time. It reads San Francisco Bay Area Stadium, and almost everything about that name is a kind of polite fiction. San Francisco isn't really the place hosting this World Cup. It's a brand stamped onto a valley that the city's own geography pushed the tournament into. The hills refused to make room. The sand wouldn't hold the weight. The water sealed off every direction at once, so the city did what it has quietly done for more than a century. It kept the name and sent the substance somewhere flatter, somewhere easier, somewhere that was never quite San Francisco at all. San Francisco didn't get a World Cup, It got its name on one, 40 miles from the city that was never built to hold it. If you enjoy stories about places where the land quietly wrote the entire history, there's another one waiting on your screen right now. Go watch it and drop a comment telling me which host city surprised you the most.